My name is Lydia Schnetta, and I am a speech language pathologist assistant for the North Coast Coastal Consortium for Special Education. I put my email on there. I'm actually in between. I'm going to be moving up to Riverside County, specifically in Temecula, next month. So if you have any questions at all, that's where you can reach me. You can also reach out to people at Nixie. And I also included a bit.ly link to the slides that you're looking at now. And I created this module to discuss how iPads can be used to support beginning switch users. All right, so as an overview for this training that we're going to whip through, we're going to talk about what switch scanning is and what switch scanning access looks like. We're going to talk about your scanning options specifically to the iPad, and we're going to talk about the hardware, and then we're going to talk about the pre-scanning skills that need to be taught because it's a cognitive task, and I'll get into that. So scanning is a process where a person or device presents choices or groups of choices to a communicator, usually, who signals when the desired item is reached. So I have a picture of a Starbucks bakery case where scanning can be in a low-tech version or a light-tech version can look like, is it in shelf 1 as you point to shelf 1? And then that you would look to the individual to indicate yes or no, and then you would say, is it in shelf 2? And then as soon as they indicate the shelf, then you would say, is it the pie, the cake, or the cookie? And then you would go through each of those choices. So scanning is a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. So, but 3- and 4-year-old children who are typically developing, they have trouble with switch scanning, but they can learn to do this. So that's pretty young. They did a case study that I reference here where it took a young girl with cerebral palsy about 10 hours in 20-minute sessions to learn how to scan. So it's hard, demands of switch scanning. There's waiting. You have to have working memory because you're having to wait for your choice to come up, or you're having to press the button a certain amount of times before you get to your choice. There's physical movement. Some of our children are just working on that aspect. They may be working on voluntary movements. They're working on tracking. So what it is that where their focus is as they're scanning. This can be done auditorily or visually. And then on top of all that, remembering what it was that you were trying to get to or what it was you were trying to say in the first place, remembering which button does what. And I see a lot of times students will be set up with one switch, and it's very hard to use one switch with scanning because you also have to have timing or rhythm. So a lot of times we will begin with 2 switches, and if fatigue is an issue, we'll back up to 1, but to teach the concept, it's done best with 2 switches. And I'll show you, and that's kind of where my steps are. They reference 2 switches. So on this slide is a picture of Napoleon Dynamite in a meme, and he's saying switch scanning is a skill. So that's what I want you to take away here. And this one I had some notes I gotta look at. So when should we start teaching it? And it's inefficient to start too early, but it's really difficult to tell when a student is ready, and we risk teaching learned helplessness when we don't present it early enough. And so even if the child is just learning some voluntary movements, we are like at the very, very initial stages when we present a switch, we're teaching initiative and not as much teaching accuracy. we're teaching, we're offering switches, and we're saying that we expect you to participate, and we know you can participate. And we're going to figure out how you can be successful with that. So specifically, we're talking about visual learners and auditory learners, and they have to have at least one voluntary physical movement. And the other caveat is that whatever it is that you're presenting on the iPad has to be meaningful for that student. So it has to be something that grabs their attention and motivates them. So the hardware setup, we're going to be talking about 4 things. So that is the short list, and you have a lot of options at each of these places, and you're going to be looking at the student, their environment, to try and figure out what setup might meet their needs the best. I'm going to recommend one, but certainly this will give you a place to jump off and start thinking about it once you consider your student. So the first thing I wanted to say was that we all know the iPad has a touchscreen, and you can set up the screen to be used as a switch. It also has a front-facing camera that you can set up as a switch with left and right head movements. But what I've found and what we've learned over the years is that external switches are the most flexible pairing with the iPad, which means that you're using something, and I don't know if you can see my 2 views where you can see my slides and my face, but I have a switch that I've pulled over, and it's one maybe that you're used to. It's one of those kind of 3-inch switches that has one of those stereo jacks on the end of it. I don't know if they're really a stereo jack, but you know the one I'm talking about, the one that fits in the top of your iPad. This allows you to position the switch where the student can access it, and it allows you to position the iPad where they can see it if they need to see it, or access. It basically gives you the most flexible offering, because a lot of times what I'll see is an iPad in a student's lap, and if they're tapping on the screen and they're trying to look at the iPad, they're not in a really great position. They might drool on the iPad. They're slumped over. It doesn't look comfortable. But so we're trying to avoid that. So we're going to recommend external switches and mounting your iPad up. So there's one thing, the external switch does require an extra piece of equipment. So on this slide, there are 3 steps, and the first step is your switch, and then and the last step is your iPad, and in between is what we call an interface. There's a few that I really like, and there's other ones that you can certainly buy. I'm just going to talk about the ones that I like today and why I like them. If you have questions about other interfaces, you can certainly email me about it, but interface. We're going to take whatever this button press does, and we're going to give it a meaning that the iPad's going to understand. So what I'm talking about is, actually, let me just go forward a slide. I'm going to show you my favorite interface, and it's probably your favorite interface too if you use an iPad for work. So an interface is anything that is used alternately to to work with your iPad. Let me see, I glitch. If you were to request an AT consult through Nixie, we would provide all of this equipment. So if you have a student specifically in mind, we can consult on that. If you would contact your program specialist. Oops, sorry, that's my hubby. And if you are, okay, good, I'm still sharing the right screen. And If you're looking for the iPad and switch setup for your classroom, again, I would start with your program specialist, and that could be easy to set up. You would reach out to your program specialist if you think this would be something you'd want in your classroom, and then your program specialist would say yes or no, and then they would contact us for the actual equipment. So there's a couple of options there. It can be for an individual student, or you can be thinking about a classroom. So certainly reach out to me, or and we can get that set up. Let me close this up. All right. So I want you to think of the interface like a keyboard. Cool. Good. I'm glad I answered your question. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. That's where I mentioned here. So the interface is basically a keyboard. Sometimes they have built-in switches. Sometimes they have ports where you plug in your own switch. Usually they have both. But we will not be using iOS switch control because those settings are for switch scanners. And we're talking about students who are not yet even switched, not even to that point. But that's the goal. But that's like 5 steps down the road. So we are going to be using apps and apps that are designed for switches. So those are apps that have switch settings built into them. Or we're talking about apps that work with single keyboard strokes. And that will become more clear as we go along. So choosing a switch. So we're moving right along. So the switches, there's a million choices. I've actually linked on the bottom of this slide, if you've downloaded the slides, there are a bunch of switches from enabling devices. There are proximity switches, there's puff switches, but most of the time you just want simple. And bigger is not always better, especially if you're talking about a student who's accessing a switch like the one in the picture, or the one that you can see in my view here that's next to my cheek. If you're positioning this switch next to somebody's face, if you have a large switch, it's actually possible to press the switch on the edge and not activate it at all, which is super frustrating. So you're considering your student, and usually a 3-inch switch is plenty big. There's different brands. In this picture, you're looking at the Jelly Bean Twist, I wrote it down. I can look here. Yeah. So Jelly Bean Twist is a good option. The Smoothly Switch is a good option if you're not using your hands. So they're perfect for the knee, elbow, and cheek. There's also a switch that is about 1 inch in diameter. If you're looking to place it near on the head or right under the chin, there's one switch that has 2 built in, and it just slides up right next to your cheek. It looks like an L. So usually that's the switch you want. So if you have one of those, great. If not, that's fine too. And I just realized I didn't share this slide with you guys. So these are my 3 favorite interfaces. The first one, I'll just say the reason that I like these 3 is because they basically emulate every keystroke on your keyboard. So anything you can do on the keyboard that within 1 keystroke, you can get that in one of these ports. So the Praetorian switch has 2 ports. It has 1 switch right on the top, and you could plug a second button right into it, and you can tell it to press space when I press this top button, or enter, or left or right. And those those are called keyboard shortcuts. Those do different things in the native apps. So that's an option with Praetorian switch. It's an option with the AbleNet Blue 2 and with the Praetorian applicator. And it just depends on how many switches you need and where you'd like to put the switch that would sort of determine which one of these you would go with. But any of these are are really flexible. So yeah, so think of them like a keyboard, and just whatever you, when I say the word program, all I'm saying is that you basically input what keystroke this is sending when I press a button. So again, we'll get some more practice on that. Oftentimes we need to position the switch, and I'm going to move through this pretty quick. There's a few resources on this slide. One is for this lock line. If you click on it, it will take you to a website where you can actually buy this as a kit, but you can certainly buy the pieces separately. And we build all kinds of fun things with lock line. We love it. This one is about, they're not cheap, but when you're looking at the old button mounts, these run about $50, where the old ones that we used to buy, they cost about $300 a piece. So $50 is a bargain. And you can certainly make them out of PVC pipe, as I did in this. And there's a video on how to make your own if you click on it. And there's also a resource for using switches. So in this resource, I got it at Closing the Gap. And essentially there's some steps you can go through. If you don't have access to an OT on your team, you can pretend, and this gets you pretty close. So you can follow the steps to try and find correct positioning. They reference the fact that having a button flat on the table sometimes makes it hard for students to, they can get on the switch usually, but getting off of it is a problem. So positioning it upright, and in this case, you see they have a special mount, but my PVC one would do the job for that. All right. So there's some resources on this slide for positioning the switch. Positioning the iPad, again, same thing. There's each of these pictures will link to a website where you can purchase these parts. You can see my favorite lock line there. You can see there's a coat hanger that someone fashioned into a book stand that would certainly work if you just needed a tabletop mount. But what you're going to consider is, where is the student expected to work? Where are they positioned in a way that they're alert and that they're ready? And then you're going to go from there to choose a mount. So these are some options. I've also made a website that, let's see if it works. I was referring to those $300 button mounts earlier. They also do a pretty good job of mounting iPads. And these are the pieces that you can get on Amazon and from some other place, readapt, in order to put together something on your own. I've also linked a second tab under that link where you can see some off-the-shelf options that are a lot cheaper than they used to be. So there's that. This is the modular hose option. So I have different colors on here because you need something from each color in order to build a mount. You have to have an arm of some kind, a cradle that fits, and some kind of a base. All right. Ooh. Okay. So pairing a Bluetooth interface to an iPad. And I'm so glad I made a video of this because it's going to be so much faster. I hope you can hear this. Let me try something here. Today I'm going to show you how to pair a Bluetooth. Let me go check and make sure that, can you guys hear it? I just paused it, but you guys are hearing it, right? Oops, I can't see you. Where are your faces? Yes. Okay, thank goodness.
Bluetooth interface with an iPad. First, go to your iPad settings.
Okay.
First, I need to find settings.
Camera. Settings. One new item.
You can ignore the voiceover.
Settings.
In the left column under settings, I need to go to Bluetooth.
Search. This select iPad, not airplane, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. On. Button. On.
And now on the right side, I'm going to look for my device, which is called Bluetooth. That is not to be confused with Bluetooth. It's under devices, and you're looking for the word blue and then the number 2.
This is the
Bluetooth. Now device in Bluetooth. Button.
Okay, there's my Bluetooth. I'm just going to select it.
Bluetooth. Connecting.
Once it's paired, it stays paired. I don't need to come back into my Bluetooth settings again. From here, I'm all set.
All right, so that's in the slides if you need to review that at some point. There's also usually written directions in the iPad, or not in the iPad, in the box. So it's pretty simple. You just pair it the way you pair a keyboard. All right, so let's get to the next slide. That's not what I want. Okay, so I did mention that multiple times that this is seen by your iPad as a keyboard, these interfaces. So sometimes you'll see a little gray bar at the bottom of your screen. This is how you get rid of it. Another issue that comes up is that you'll try to type something and your keyboard's gone on your screen. So usually there's a shortcut on the interface, and this interface there, oh no, my screen remover is taking, there's a green background on these buttons, so it's taking them away and making it Torrey Pines. There's a little button you press and it turns the light on, and that means your keyboard's going to show up. So on this one, there's a button on the side that looks like a keyboard, and you would just press it and your keyboard would pop up. So that's usually one of the first calls I get when I take this out to a teacher. All right, so that brings us down to levels and apps. I'm trying to rush through. I don't want to keep you guys too late. So one of the things I wanted to say is that children as young as 6 months can control a switch. So, which is pretty amazing. So, you know, a lot of kids can learn this, even very young ones. So we're not talking about switch scanning. We're talking about cause and effect. And there's some apps out there that I'm going to share with you. On this slide, what you're looking at is a summary of the steps. And these are from, they're based on the work by Linda Burkhardt. And she does a whole series on steps before step scanning as it applies to some software, some software that she's developed. First it was for IntelliTools, if you've been around that long, and then later on it was there's a new software platform that she uses. So so it's based on Linda Burkhardt's steps, but I've just applied it to the iPad. So level 1 type apps are cause and effect, and there's, if you need to, if your child's having trouble understanding the cause and effect, there's also in some of these apps a way to have them activate directly. So as long as they're pressing the button, something happens on the screen, and when they move away from the button, it stops. So we want to move them out of the stage as quickly as possible, but for some students, they really need to go through that. But it doesn't hurt to start in a timed mode where they press the button, get in a played activity for 10 seconds, and then they press the button again. So that would be timed play. So that's cause and effect, like really broken down. Some featured apps are the Sights and Sounds apps. I actually have a link to all the apps that I'm featuring and then some extras. And then I have ways for you to sort them in different ways. So level 1, I'm going to feature these ones. And then level 2 is also cause and effect, except you're going to introduce a second button. So as soon as the student has 2 volitional movements, you can start teaching them that one button does one thing and then the second button does something completely different. So ideally you would start this with one button controlling the iPad and a second button controlling a single message or a sequenced message speech generating device, like this Big Mac or Little Mac. I'm sorry, step by step. There's a little image of it on this slide. So I have this one set up to say things like, hey, come over here. Look at me. So this one's going to grab attention, and then this one plays the game. Or I might have it set up to end the game. Yahoo! I'm done here. Please help me. So 2 different language functions that you could set up, and you would just tell the student, okay, when you're done, or maybe you would read their body, you look like you're done. You can tell me you're done with this button. I'm done. And then show them. And I would use an external switch with this, like just get a second one of these guys on here because this thing gets very loud in your ear if you have it mounted next to your face. If you have it mounted down next to your leg, it's not such a big deal, but it's just something to think about. So cause and effect, and then on the third level, you're looking at doing 2 switches, doing 2 different things on the iPad. So there's some apps that work really well with that I'm going to get to, but I think I need to get started. Steps 4 and 5 are when you're starting to scan. So you're actually step scanning, and these are some tips to help students sort of learn that. You're basically teaching them one-to-one correspondence. So as early as kids can understand that concept, and I think my son understood it even in preschool, he got that concept. You can start, and it's very close to literacy, like, so they're understanding that every time I hit the button, I'm going to the next, I'm going to the next. So in the self-talk that I like to do with that is, I'll get 2 switches set up, and one is no, 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 that's the one I want. So no, 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 yes, that's what that's referring to. And then those are some activities. Once you get into steps 4 and 5, you're basically starting to look at curriculum. You're talking about using communication devices. The difference between levels 4 and 5 is that it's level 4. That scanning is a very cognitive job for the student. So it's still very cognitive. So you can't really tell what the student knows using switches. You're still teaching it. And then somewhere along the way, it just becomes really clear. So that's what we would call a level 5 switch user. I do have some videos of level 5 switch users, and I know quite a few, and it happens somewhere along the way. I'm not quite sure how. I'm not there every day, but I've seen it happen. So let's get into what these, so here's the tool I have for you guys. So on this one, I have all the apps listed by level. I'm going to go to this. So if you click on it, it takes you to a spreadsheet that I've made. I have in column A, it says Lydia's favorites to start with, level 1, and I mean level 1 and 2. And if you hover over the A, you can actually sort it to bring all of those things to the top. So everything that I've marked is going to show up at the top. And then over here, you'll see the app name. And then the next column, column C to G, you'll see that I've indicated about what level those are. If you go all the way to the end, I've indicated to column N, I've indicated which ones are good for older students. A lot of the Switch apps are geared towards preschool, but there are some things we can do with older students, but they're mainly using the they're mainly using leisure things, but in a therapeutic setting, you're just sabotaging them so that they get practice hitting the switch, which I'll spend a little more time on in a minute. So that's the tool that I've started. It's a work in progress. I'm still doing hyperlinks to everything. So I got this list from Jane Farrell. She has a website that she keeps up to date. She has a lot more on there, but I haven't quite used all of the things that she's showcased. So I'm not sure. I've tried a few of them, and there's some I just didn't really care for. So I've just sort of shortened it down. There's a lot in there. And now I'd like to share with you one of our students, and I have permission to share this from his folks. But this is probably a week into learning switches. He's using an app called Sights and Sounds Firework, and he has it in that really beginning mode where as long as he's holding the button down, it's playing, and then when he gets off the button, it stops. So why don't we take a look at that? He has a little gray bar on the bottom. Gotta turn that off. So they're still working on positioning. He has really great head control, and he likes to work on the floor. And you can see his attention is really good there. He's looking for the switch, so as long as he's doing that, you would just continue. And he's probably going to get tired of it in a few minutes and want to do something else. And that's pretty much what it looks like. And then I also included a reminder that you want to get to timed play, and that's built into this switch settings. So that's in the slides for you to review. I'm going to go ahead and move along. So these are the featured apps that I've sort of I've indicated them on that spreadsheet as level 1 and 2 apps.
I'm sharing some level 1 and 2 assorted apps with you. The first one is from Inclusive Technologies. The main thing to remember when you're using these apps is that the switches have to be enabled in the settings. Settings are found in the bottom left corner of the menu. Enable your switches and choose from one of the 4 patterns. Now, use space or enter to activate the pattern. Video works on a timed play. Big Bang Pictures. Choose the appropriate complexity. Use space or enter to play. The other group of level 1 and 2 apps are made by Marblesoft. Again, the switches must be enabled in settings, which is in the center of your screen. There are 3 modes to choose from. I will be demonstrating a momentary press and release to stop.
To play.
Screen goes dark. Now I'll show you the Flowers app. Slides. An adapted book. Use presenter mode. Press space or enter to advance the slides and animate the slides. Sound may be added.
Tap Speak allows you to play a sequence of messages. They can be used to tell a story, sing a song, recite a poem, or tell a joke. An external switch interface can be used. Different sequences can be saved.
Twinkled how I...
Simon says,
touch your nose.
jump up and down.
Jump up.
So those are just some ideas, real quick. The level 3 apps are, you can also find them on that spreadsheet. And just for I wasn't able to share these during the webinar, but I went back and I added in the level 3 apps that are featured on the list and that work well with 2 switches. The first one's touch to jump, and we have 2 switches that do 2 different functions on the iPad. The next app's called Racing Cars from Help Kids Learn. You can use 2 switches. One switch will move the cursor and the other one will select.
Nothing here. A racing car. Nothing here. Nothing here. A racing car.
The next app is also from Help Kids Learn. It's called Shh. The left button activates the door and the right button will always activate the man that's sleeping in the bed. The next app is from Marblesoft and it's called Switch Kids. There's 3 different options for gameplay, and the left button and right button do different things. It can either show a different style of face, or it can make the bubble bigger and smaller, always contrasting actions and unexpected outcomes. The next app is called Build a Face, where you can make errorless choices and construct your own silly face. Another app is Smarty Pants, where you can use 2 switches to pick an expression and watch your character act it out. And these again are errorless choices. Next app is called Counting Songs, and if you choose songs, you'll see that you have a compilation of 11 songs, and you can make those choices switch accessible.
5 in the bed.
So again, we have errorless choices.
All rolled over and the bed went crash. 5 brown, 5 little men in a flying saucer.
Counting Songs 2 is the next in the group, and again it has another group of songs that your student can select with errorless choices.
5
One player runs along the pitch, scores a goal without a hitch. He is having so much fun, he wants to score another one. Cheer him up, he wants to score another one.
5 girls in 5, 5, 5, Rockstar. 5, Shark. 5, Sing. 5, Superboy. 5, Big Dinosaurs.
Pictello with 2 switches. Pictello books can be used with switches. To set up switches, in the bottom right corner you'll find options, and then about 3/4 of the way down your menu you'll find an option to configure switches. There are only 2 things that your switches can do, and that is turn the page or read the page. So in order to set that up, you tap on the gray text and it will give you a list of keystrokes. Whatever your device sends will work. I've set this up to be space and enter. Once that's all set and I have the orange check mark next to 2 switches, I can choose the book that I want to read by tapping on it. Now I have to choose switches from underneath the book title page and press the play button in the center.
Tom's in trouble. Tom Sawyer got in trouble all the time.
Tom ate the strawberry jam.
Another reason why I like Pictello is that it works with the Tar Heel reader. So I can make my own stories, or I can select from thousands of already pre-made, high-interest, age-appropriate books and materials. So I've set up a shortcut that takes me to the website. It looks like a little Greek columned building, and then that takes me to the home page that I've bookmarked through Safari. I can search for a high-interest book such as Lady Gaga, and it looks like there are 2. I can preview that book, but what I really want to do is save it in my Pictello story so that I can read it later. So if I tap on it, I can copy the address, the URL address, and then I can take it to my next bookmark, which is another website, which is it's the converter tool. So if you were to Google convert Tar Heel reader to Pictello, you would be able to find that fairly easily. So this is what the Tar Heel reader Pictello to Pictello looks like. You're going to paste in the address that you'd copied earlier and then click on Pictello it. It takes about 23 seconds, and then I should have a link to my story. Success. It looks like my Tar Heel reader is done. I can click on the download Pictello story in number 1. It should open up in another screen. Does not seem to be working. The workaround can be done in number 2, where you can import the story using a code. So go ahead and copy the code by tapping on it and dragging the handlebars to copy. And then go into Pictello, tapping on the cloud that's the second from the right, and tapping in the text field next to the word download. Paste your code in there and your story should show up in just a moment.
Lady Gaga. This is Lady Gaga. She is weird.
You can also find them on that spreadsheet, and just for time's sake, I think I'm going to have to skip those. I'd like to share one more thing with you. So another option for those really beginning Switch users are, and for students who just aren't really motivated by those Switch apps, or maybe students who are too old for those apps, there are some other options. We can do media play on the iPad, and it's the only one that requires something other than space and enter. So in this case, you would look at your keyboard and it has, whoops, F8 and F9 is the single keystroke that plays media. And so that's what I've set up. So I'm going to play this video for you. When AbleNet came out with a Bluetooth keyboard that I could program, I used these keyboard shortcuts on some of the extra channels, and I was able to take an iPad 1 and use switches with it to do music. As you can see, this interface not so friendly to beginning switch users. First thing I want to do is round up a keyboard and make sure that it has a USB. Take your switch and plug it in. On the side, you'll notice there's a button that says Learn. You're just going to turn that on. And automatically, it switches me to mode 4, which is the first empty mode that you'll see here. We're going to program F8 into the first button on the white one, and then F9 into the other one. So to program, all I have to do is make sure that it's in Learn mode, so I've toggled that over. Now I'm just going to tap on the button, press the button on the keyboard, and then tap it again. And that's it. So I'm going to do the other side, F9. That's it. I'm done programming. Pull up a playlist, tap on the first song to start playing the music. Oops. Wrong spot. Okay. I have to take it out of Learn mode to use my switch. So again, so you'll cue up the music, and then you'll give the user a switch, such as this one, and I'm going to plug it into S1 so that I have that play pause feature in this switch. And now, as a user, I can use my switch that I normally use to play music on my iPad. I made a list of 2 really different types of music. I have hip hop and I have bossa nova, so hopefully it could be a discrimination type activity for my student. I'm going to plug this into the other port, and this playlist is about 20 songs long, and if I'm listening and I don't like the song, I can hit my switch to go to the next one. Still bossa nova. I'm going to hit it again. Actually, I kind of like that song. So I hope you guys like my tutorial. If you guys know any shortcuts on the keyboard that work with your iPad, those would also be good on the Bluetooth. And if you guys know any other Bluetooth interfaces that you can program, please leave those in the comments below. Thank you very much. All right, guys, I could just keep talking, but I know you guys have other things to do. Thank you for joining me today with this webinar. I'm going, before you all leave, if you could, if I can find it, my, get out of play mode. Come and get me. Oops. I'm going to share out a slide for, there it is. Yeah. If you can fill out this form, it's just a Google Doc. You can either scan the QR code there, you get the blue dot, blue squares off of it, or you can go to this link, and then that will give me feedback. Trying to make this fit into an hour, but didn't quite get there this time. I had probably 20 more minutes of stuff to share with you. But certainly you have the app list, you've got the media thing's really fun. It works for everybody. and it's good for those students who aren't quite to scanning yet. So you can do the same thing with podcasts, by the way. I go into that a little bit here. So any of this, YouTube, Pandora, music app, voice stream reader app, those are all considered media. So that little tutorial that's down here on the slide, you can actually click on it and view that video again if you need to walk through it. So any interface that you can do a keyboard shortcut in, and that would work. The Praetorian interfaces, they have a media mode built in, and they just call it play pause instead of F8. So it's a little easier. And I think I need to let you guys go. Thank you so much. Again, click on the link in chat and tell me what you think.